Good afternoon or morning, whenever you happen to be watching. This is Steve Sellers with Sellers, Ayers, Storage and Lines, and you're watching CAI North Carolina Smarter in 5 minutes. So over the next few minutes, we'll try and meet that goal. We're going to talk just a little bit about remote participation in meetings for member meetings and the possibility of electronic voting under the recently revised North Carolina Nonprofit Corporation Act. This is probably something that is on your radar if you've been on a board or you've been a property manager in North Carolina for any length of time. There's a lot of ground that we could cover. We don't have that much time. So what I want to do is focus on one critical question that your association needs to ask and answer when you're looking at taking some sort of member action, whether it is to elect a board, vote on an amendment, maybe pass a special assessment or something along those lines. Anytime that you are going to be asking your association's members to cast a vote. The reason that this one question is so important is that it sets the tone for everything that follows after it. It's really a fork in the road in that sense. And the question is, are we going to be taking this action at a meeting of the members, or are we going to be taking it apart from a meeting? The reason that the question is so critical is if you don't ask and clearly answer that question and then proceed accordingly, you risk blending processes. What I mean by that is, we've seen a number of things over the last couple of years, particularly since COVID, where associations have, for example, set a date for an in-person meeting where they were going to vote on, let's say, a special assessment. They held that meeting, but in the lead up to that meeting, they also sent out some form of a written ballot, maybe an electronic ballot, in addition to a traditional paper ballot. And they set the deadline for that ballot the day of the meeting. And the idea was we're going to take a vote at the meeting, and we're going to add to that vote all of the ballots that came in ahead of time. Now, that makes a lot of sense from a practical and sort of common sense standpoint. It seems like a great way to increase the odds of member participation, make it easy for members to participate. Unfortunately, that blending of processes of a written ballot or maybe a written and an electronic ballot plus a meeting just is not consistent with what the law allows. And it's that blending of processes that you can just very easily fall into if you haven't very clearly answered the question, are we taking this action at a meeting or are we doing something else apart from a meeting? Now, if you have decided that we are going to take this particular action, vote on our hypothetical special assessment at a meeting, North Carolina law now does more easily allow people to participate through this kind of form, through Zoom or something else like that, where they participate remotely in member meetings and member action. The key thing that you need to be discussing as a board with your manager, with your legal counsel, is how are we going to ensure that people who participate remotely in this meeting are able to do so, participate, potentially, interrupt, raise points of order, speak during the meeting, and as I mentioned, potentially interrupt the meeting just as they could in person. That's one of the key concepts that the law has built into it. If we're going to allow people to participate remotely, we need to make sure that they can participate to the same extent as if they were there in person. Obviously, that does away with one of the favorite things about Zoom meetings, particularly during COVID, which was the muted meeting from start to finish. You can't mute people in person, so you need to be talking with your legal counsel about whether you can mute them when they join remotely. I would have significant concerns about that. On the other side of the coin, if we're not taking this action at a meeting, we're going to use electronic voting or some other form of voting apart from the meeting itself. Number one, understand we're drawing a very clear distinction between having a meeting and not having a meeting. If we are not having a meeting, there are only really two ways to take the action, practically speaking. One is a traditional mail written ballot that we've been using for years and years. And the other is some form of electronic voting where you send out a link to a specifically designated email address that the member has provided to the association, and you allow them to vote in an electronic manner. That is an option. You should talk to your legal counsel about what your association needs to do to ensure that you have obtained and properly documented designated email addresses, because that is a key aspect of electronic voting under the new act. So again, we're scratching the surface on the procedures for remote participation and electronic voting. What I want you to take away from our few minutes together today is that question, that fork in the road. Are we going to take this action at a meeting? If so, we have to do A, B, C, and D. Or are we taking this action apart from the meeting? In which case we do X, Y, and Z. So thank you for tuning in. Hope it was helpful, and hope we get a chance to speak again soon. Thank you.